When I was 32 years old, I was a newly minted ordinand, had just been ordained. And one of the things they often said to those of us who were ordained was that we would undergo an ontological change. You know, in biology, an ontological change is when a zygote, which is, that first cell, when the sperm and egg come together, becomes differentiated into a human being. That is an ontological change, right? From one cell to many cells, and cells operating in different ways. Or like from a caterpillar to a butterfly. That's a clear ontological change. And I thought to myself, me? Ontologically changed by an ordination? What am I going to become? I thought, well, maybe I will gain a certain kind of beingness in which I can read dense, high medieval theology. So I picked up this book called The Cloud of Unknowing. And I thought, hey, let's see if I've been ontologically changed. And I opened the first page and I read, "Here beginneth the prayer on the prologue God, unto whom all hearts be open, and unto whom all will speaketh, and unto whom no privy thing is hid. I beseech thee so for to cleanse the intent of mine heart with the unspeakable gift of thy grace, that I may perfectly love thee and worthily praise thee. Amen." Familiar? Yeah, we say this every Sunday practically. The collect for purity. I read that and I'm like, oh, so far so good, right? And I continue to read, and it's one of those rare books that I have found in which most of the introduction is telling you not to read it. Don't go on. If you're not serious about this, don't go on. Don't read. Because what I want you to do, if you want to proceed, is to be really serious, not just about your life in action by following Jesus, but really serious about your life in contemplation by following Jesus. If you are not going to be serious about the contemplative life, which is a life of silent prayer and internal surrender, don't go on. And I don't know what else it said because I fell asleep. And 2 hours later, I decided I was not ontologically changed. So I really identify with Peter and John and James when they fall asleep at the mountain of Transfiguration. So why are they there? They recently, 8 days ago, it said, 8 days ago, they received some really hard news. Jesus said, "I'm going to be crucified. And on the third day, I will rise." This was very confusing news. We all know that there was an expectancy about the Messiah who would come in glory to free Israel. Not a Messiah who's going to be crucified. This was not in their imagination, and they didn't know what to make of it. It was very hard news. Jesus is going to die? Jesus is going to suffer? And then Jesus said, "I've given you some hard news. Let's go up Mount Tabor and let's go pray." And so they filled their water bottles, put on their backpacks, and they trudged up the mountain. Remember, there weren't switchbacks back then. They went straight up that mountain. And imagine walking up that mountain and going, "Why are we going all this way to pray? I feel like God will hear my prayers just as well down the valley." But Jesus did not go up the mountain to speak to God. Jesus went up the mountain to listen, to do the prayer of listening to God. And sometimes you get to get away from all the noise in order to listen. So he took them all the way up to the top of the mountain. And when they sat down, Jesus led by example and just sat down and prayed. He did not move his lips. He did not bring out his list of people he's thinking about. He was just silent. And the disciples thought, well, okay, I'll just copy him. Let's just sit down, be quiet. And, within 5 minutes, the jaw cracking yawns. And then the snoring. How long were they asleep before they woke and saw Jesus talking with Elijah and Moses? They were talking about his departure. In Greek, that word is exodus. They were talking about his exodus. Freshly from their nap, what was this talk about an exodus? We only know of one exodus, the Moses exodus. What's going on here? Are we being led to a promised land? What is happening? They didn't know. The conversation was confusing, but what they did see was that Jesus was lit up. He was bright. He was warm. It was glorious. It was mysterious, but it felt powerful. And Peter said, let's stay here. I'm going to build 3 booths, and we can all stay here and keep this moment going. And as soon as he said that, a great cloud of unknowing came and surrounded them, squeezing out all commentary, all thoughts about what they thought should happen in this world. They did not know. Suddenly, they did not know anything. And their skin pricked from the coldness of the cloud. And Peter held out his hand and he couldn't see it. It was so dark. And all this unknowing terrified them. It terrified them. And suddenly, they heard a voice. One saying, "This is my son, my beloved. Listen, listen, listen to him." And the cloud went away. And Jesus opened his eyes. He was in the same spot sitting. And he said, "Okay, let's go down." And the disciples are looking at each other like, what just happened? This is crazy. What's going on? First, we're told he's going to die. And then he's going to rise. And then we came up here and we saw this light. And then we had this darkness. They didn't know. They didn't know how to stitch it all together. So they spent the night up the mountain, but then went down. And what did they think was going to happen when they got down? I mean, they had seen something amazing. And when they got back down, it was more of the same. More people in need of healing. Jesus, do this for me. Jesus, do that for me. Your disciples aren't really good at what they're doing. Do this for us. And not only that, Jesus will say again, a second prediction. I'm going to be crucified. And on third day, I will rise. What is good about a mountaintop experience? When you come down, it's the same. The thing you thought like, oh, at least maybe we will have some power over our lives. all this glory. Maybe when we come down, we'll know how to fix everybody. We'll know how to fix the world. We'll know how to fix ourselves. And instead, it's more of the same. What must they have been thinking? It was very confusing. The Transfiguration happens between two predictions of the crucifixion and resurrection. Jesus took them up the mountain, at least I believe in part, to pull back a layer on reality. All this chaos, all that is unknown, all the suffering, to reveal the hidden reality behind the reality we think is reality. I also think he wanted to teach them some skills, the skills of prayer, the skill of quieting the mind and the lurching of the will before that bright day dawns. Because before that bright day dawns, they will need to give up everything. Luke's gospel is a praying gospel. And almost every major event in the Gospel of John, it's preceded with the phrase, and while they were praying, or and while he was praying. Jesus in the Gospel of John almost never says anything after the words, and while he was praying. The only time he seems to have words in a prayer is when he teaches the Lord's Prayer to the disciples. But outside of that, whenever Jesus was praying, it was silent. This is really important. This is the contemplative prayer. When Jesus is praying, most of the time, he's not praying for something, not even for instructions on like, what should I do? How will I unlock the key? How will I get the key to unlock things so I can help, so I can fix? It seems to me most of the time when Jesus is praying, he's not praying for something, but he is praying to listen. To listen to the one who calls him beloved. Have you ever been to the mountaintop? Have you come down and found, to your great disappointment, everything was the same? The same old tensions in the family, the same old politics, the same old needs, the same old mess that you thought you would be able to untangle when you came down. Or for those of us who've never had a mountaintop experience, maybe you go to the library and you read everything you can. You're like, I'm gonna crack this code here. I'll figure it out. And then once I know enough, I will be able to fix everything. And yet, what is real, what is true, is that we live in a time of chaos. We don't know what to do. It's so big. It's so beyond us. What is our response? I think when we have nothing left, we always have this kind of prayer. The prayer of silence. A prayer not trying to pierce into the chaos and trying to order it, but a prayer that anchors us into the land of silence, so that when we are buffeted by the winds of chaos, we are not lost. And this land is called love. This is the land that calls us beloved. It's been 20 years since I held that book, The Cloud of Unknowing. And for the preparation of the sermon, I decided I was going to pick it up again. Instant yawns, man. I have not changed at all. But the one thing that has changed is I don't feel I have to read this book anymore. I'm just going to acknowledge that my brain doesn't like high medieval theology, and that perhaps I can read people who can translate it for me. And I highly recommend Martin Laird, Thomas Keating. Martin Laird is my all-time favorite, who teaches about contemplative prayer and how to get very quiet, how to surrender. And I feel this kind of prayer is very important these days because we live in a time of so much chaos, so much noise, where every opinion comes free of charge and quick fixes abound. In this kind of time, there's nothing more precious than silence, nothing harder to find than an unknowing. I have to go to silence a lot. In my work as a priest, I am constantly before problems I have no idea how to penetrate. I don't know how to fix. And they can be pretty small. Even an administrative problem, I don't know. And sometimes so many things I cannot figure out. I lose courage. And sometimes I fantasize about leaving the ministry as if that's going to fix it, right? But I know that they're just momentary drops in my courage. And when I am in that place, I have to go to the land of silence. I have to anchor myself into the beloved, so that buffeted by the winds of all that assails me and scares me, I will in the end find my way back, holding on to that rope, pulling myself as that pulls me. And I can hear and listen as Jesus has taught us to on the mountain of Transfiguration, to listen to the one who calls us beloved, who calls you beloved. Imagine if the best thing we can offer the world today is to anchor ourselves into this land of silence. Imagine if we move and speak first by getting quiet and not moving. Imagine if we spent time really listening to love before we put out love. I believe if we do this as a daily practice, we will be like this scenario in which a monk goes to his abbot, having had a long obedience, and wanted to know, what else? Is there more I can do to gain the spiritual life? And his abbot says, lifting up his hands and all aflame, he says, if you choose, you can become all flame. Lit up, transfigured, ontologically changed. Amen.